Today, I'm excited to have Jennifer Polk here with us, and I'm going to read a short bio from her press kit on from PhD to life.com. Jennifer Polk works as an academic, career, and life coach. Her clients, graduate students, and PhDs are a diverse group of individuals based all around the world, from Canada, the US, the UK, Europe, Australia, and elsewhere. Jen speaks on campuses and at conferences throughout North America on issues related to graduate education and career outcomes for PhD. And her writing has appeared in the Globe and Mail, University Affairs, Vitae, and Academic Matters. You can find Jen online at fromphd2life.com, which features resources for PhD changers, PhD career changers, and at her award-winning University Affairs blog. Jen earned her PhD in history from the University of Toronto in 2012. Again, we're so glad to have you. Thank you for being here. Welcome, Jen.
Work as a life coach, and that is from PhDlife.com. And mostly I'm working with folks that are trying to finish their dissertations, and then especially, what's next? I don't know. So that's from PhDlife.com. And then, and the Twitter handle is the same, from PhDlife. And I've got a couple of other businesses too. So the second business is called Beyond the Professoriate, and that's a partnership with Maren Wood, who's another history PhD. And that is an online conference and other things to come. So we do professional development for PhDs. So that's beyondprof.com, Beyond the Professoriate. And then the third thing I do, which is really new, is called Self-Employed PhD, which is an online community and learning network. I think this is my new tagline for it. For freelancers, consultants, small business owners, entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call it. So that, and people can find out more about that at selfemployedphd.com if they want to know.
So let's just say that you have your hands full, don't you?
Oh my gosh, I know. I'm busy. It's good though. It's exciting. It feels a little bit like I have kind of a job with the coaching from PhD Life, but I need to build up these other things. So yeah, juggling a few different things. Yeah, it's good. It's exciting.
Great. Okay. So in 2012, you earned your PhD, and in 2013, you started as a life coach.
Yes.
Was that 2013?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Right. Yep.
How and why did you make that decision, or should I say transition?
Yeah. It's a big question. How and why? So I normally tell the story like this, that I finished in February, right, 5 years ago, my PhD. And when you finish in February, you either have already applied for academic jobs or you're going to apply for them the next fall. So I hadn't applied for any, so it's like, I'll do that later. Well, it never happened. I never did apply for academic jobs. And what happened the next fall was that life just wasn't going how I hoped it would go, and I didn't even know exactly how the details of that hope. I didn't know what that even meant. So to make a long story short, I ended up hiring a coach, a career coach. I know now that she essentially is a life coach too. And this is Hillary Hutchinson. Her website is transitioningyourlife.com, and she works with academics. That's her specialty. And working with her changed my life. I'd never interacted with anybody like that before, and we worked intensively for a few months, and I started to feel way better about my life, right? I started to feel way better about my life. I was stopped feeling like a loser with a PhD, and started to embrace the fact that I was in a career transition, and this was a totally normal thing, and started to think, maybe I want to work as a coach too, but that there was several months. I started working with Hillary in November 2012, and then at the very end of May 2013, so it's like 6 months later, more than that, I signed up for a coaching class, like an introductory class on how to coach. So, in the meantime, I read about coaching and I did informational interviews with coaches. And of course, I worked with Hillary for a few months and figured, well, let's just take this one class. And I don't know that I want to work as a coach, but for me at that point, it was, let's just take this one class and see how it goes. And a month into that course, more or less, I had my first client. And I continued to take other classes. And so now it's been just over 3.5 years and taking things one step at a time. No big strategy at the beginning of, getting more strategic now, but one step at a time and adding in the online conference and now self-employed PhD and seeing where it goes. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to ask this. I hear this again and again, and I think I felt this myself, that PhDs who tend to venture out of the academia or research-based institutions, especially into entrepreneurship or freelancing, they tend to have this ugly duckling feeling or being left out. Does that? Did you feel that? Have you experienced it, or among yourself or among the many clients that you coached?
Well, I said this already. I definitely felt like a bit of a loser with a PhD. And I would say that to people like half joking. Right? And I definitely felt, I wouldn't say ugly duckling, but I definitely felt that, and this is years ago when I was just starting to think, maybe I could do something else. I don't know. Maybe. That felt very lonely and scary, and literally lonely because I didn't know anyone else thinking along those lines. I started to learn that at least theoretically people were thinking along those lines because you would read stuff online. So, you sort of, at least these internet people are doing it, but I didn't know anyone like in the flesh who was thinking along those lines. So that was challenging. One of the things that helped me, and that I think some people can relate to this and other people have less of this, but one of the things that helped me was that I had a really fun hobby during my PhD that had nothing to do with academics. And so I ended up knowing a lot of people who don't have PhDs and who do other things. And that didn't necessarily provide me with any clear career paths. My hobby was in the independent music scene here in Toronto, which is like not a career. So, it didn't help me in that sense, but I knew that there were other people in the world that were like fun and interesting to hang out with. So just that, like psychologically, I think was helpful. But it definitely took a while. I mean, it took a long time to develop a network, or to put it another way, to make friends with other PhDs who were not academics, like not working on the tenure track, and to make friends with those people, and to develop that community. That took time. Am I answering your question?
Yes. So I know that you're very active on Twitter. That's how I first found you. I was like, oh, somebody does this kind of work. I never thought so. And I think you probably meet a lot of people who say the same thing, right? So how has social media kind of helped you get to where you are?
Yes, and it has. Yeah, it has. So in the beginning, I got on Twitter with this new account. I'd been on Twitter in the past, totally different brand, right? Totally different. But I got on Twitter, this new account, in I think January 2013. Yeah, it must have been January 2013. And I just started my blog. So the from PhD to life.com began as a blog, and that started in December 2012. So then in January, I got on Twitter. And I made an effort. I made an effort to seek out people, as one does, to seek out other PhDs. And I discovered hashtags like alt-ac, and then later on post-ac. and started to reach out to people that were talking about this stuff. And okay, what do I mean by that? I mean, I started retweeting them, and I started tweeting at them, and I started jumping in on their conversations, right? And sharing articles online and using alt-ac as a hashtag. And so you start, for me, I spent a lot of time in that. And at the beginning, it was a personal thing, right? I was trying to find my people.
Yeah.
Like lonely. And I wasn't coaching yet. That didn't happen until a few months later. So at the beginning, it was really a personal project. I mean, it was fun, and I made friends that way. And then later it morphed into, oh, well, I work as a coach now, and I'm starting this new business, this new thing, and I can tell people about it on Twitter, right? And so now I invest. I would say I spend a little bit less time personally on Twitter, but I invest money in maintaining Twitter. And so I made a decision like a while back that I would use Twitter to be regularly sharing resources with members of my community, and using Twitter as a way of building and maintaining a community around these issues. And yes, self-promo is part of it, but much more than that is just keep pumping out these resources for people. And you can tell me if you've seen that. That's the intention there.
Yeah. You started out building a community. Now you're kind of, yeah. Okay. So that definitely helps. And so I have this, when I completed my PhD and kind of was thinking about, okay, so why did I do that PhD again? I did a Google search, and the first thing that comes up is this post from findaphd.com, which says, well, one should pursue a PhD because, and say, to achieve something significant, right? And then it says those whose ambitions are to make money should become entrepreneurs. And so there's this, so doing a PhD and being an entrepreneur are kind of thought as two sides of a river that they shouldn't cross, right?
Yeah.
And it's like saying that PhDs, you don't need money too, right? So what thoughts do you have about this now that you've kind of...
It's so funny. So my PhD is in history, so it's humanities background. And I think the money question is a bit different for humanities people, because people assume, when you fail out of the tenure track, you're going to go work at Starbucks, which is not true at all. But, there's not the same sense of you're an engineer and you're going to make a ton of money, because engineers make a ton of money. So I think it's just a bit different in the humanities. So that's part of it. But the other thing is that I'm in Canada, and professors, they get paid well here. Maybe not as well as, lawyers and doctors, like medical doctors, but they get paid all right. I think a starting salary for a humanities prof in a city, in a big city, is like 70, 80 something, which, that's awesome as far as I'm concerned. So, I make nowhere near that in my business. Give me a few years, hopefully, but I'm nowhere near that. And please, I'm happy to have people say, well, that's because you suck as a business owner and entrepreneur. Sure. Yes, I'm working on it. But yeah, it's a funny question, because I know where that comes from. When you have a salary, there's kind of a limitation most of the time in how much you can make. But when you start a business, there's this idea that you could make as much. Well, this is great in theory, but the reality is it can take some time. And I'm not the kind of entrepreneur. Maybe you don't consider me an entrepreneur at all, but I do not have a tech product that I can scale and sell a million things of. That's not my path. So, I'm shaking my head at that. I think it's silly. I don't know. I just think it's silly. Plus, why do you do a PhD? I think there's a ton of reasons that people do PhDs, and there's a ton of reasons that people work for themselves or start businesses. And I think those reasons can be very similar to each other.
Yeah, and then you make a good point that, and this is something that I've been thinking too, actually, when you think about the fact you want to get a tenure track job because you want that independence and that flexibility, that's something that entrepreneurs want too, right? And then in faculty positions, you get more grants, your income increases. So it's, the money plays both ways. I think it's the same thing, but we're taking it as different.
Yeah. Yeah, and it certainly is different, but I mean, if you abstract out, what do? I work from home. Academics do that too. I talk to people. Academics do that too. I write and I research stuff. Yeah, the outcomes are different, but I do a lot of intellectual work. You know, I'm smart and I'm interesting and I do creative stuff. I don't, you know, it's obviously the details are different. And I would say that as long as I can pay my bills, right? As long as I can pay my bills, I can do whatever I want. And as somebody on the tenure track, maybe tenured, I don't know, but on the tenure track, you do not have that freedom and you do not have that flexibility.
That's true too.
You do maybe if you get a huge grant and you get out of teaching and out of committee work for a year, and then it's a little bit more like you can just do what you want if you get a huge grant. But most profs, like that's a job. I mean, you got to work for a living. I do too, but yeah, I don't know. The world's complicated. You know, jobs are complicated and complex and complicated and complex. Yeah. Different.
Okay, that's true. So, what advice? What is kind of the base of the message that you take on when you go to universities and talk to students?
I'm making a face. I know. I mean, one of the messages that okay. So one of the messages is think of the PhD as metaphorically, at least metaphorically, as like you had a job and hopefully it was a decent job and it was cool and you learned skills and you made connections. But when you finish, maybe now you have to get a different job, and that's a totally normal thing. It's really normal. And maybe you had a job and you discovered that you don't like that career path, or that career path isn't open to you, or you have to move to Boise, Idaho, which I'm sure is lovely, but you know, there's lots of reasons why people might not want to continue in a career path. And that's totally normal, totally normal. So that's one message, is that you can help yourself by reframing this. But I also don't wish to make light of the real grief that comes with this for a lot of people. It's very heavy emotionally for a lot of my clients, a lot of people I interact with, to think about not working as a professor, even in STEM, like even in science fields, which surprised me. It no longer surprised me, but it used to really totally surprise me. Even in science, there's this hierarchy between academic science and other kinds of science, and there's this extreme hierarchy between, you know, science, quote unquote, doing the science, and things that aren't science, and that, oh my God, but that moving away from science or scholarship or, you know, quote, intellectual work, unquote, that's heavy emotionally for a lot of people. So, you know, to send that message too, that if you're struggling with this psychologically, yep, that's totally normal. And there's a pathway through it. And it's not just that you need to write a resume. Yeah, you do, but right. You know, there's all this other shit that's getting in the way. And plus you're confident. Anyways, I'm rambling on and on and on. A message that I don't tend to, it's not a conversation I tend to have because of who my audiences are, but another takeaway I think that I could leave with audiences is, why are you even doing a PhD? Maybe you should reconsider this. And that's not a message that you say to somebody that's in their 5th year, unless, you know, they don't want to finish it, right?
Right.
And I do have those conversations with people, like, you don't have to finish, you can leave, there's better things for you. I mean, if there are. But for the people that are younger, who I don't tend to interact with that much, but for the people that are earlier on in their academic careers, you know, it might be a better decision not to do a PhD. And I don't mean to be, it's a decision that people have to make on their own. It is complex. And I don't think you can say, as some people do, blanket, don't do a PhD, don't go to grad school. That's wrong. I think that's totally the wrong response. But I think it's worth considering, you know, whether this really is the right thing to do, because there are consequences. Yeah, sometimes some positive, but there are negative consequences potentially of doing a PhD. I wish there weren't, but, you know, I talk to a lot of folks that are struggling years later. Yeah.
So,
what do you think?
So what consequences do usually people have, the ones that pursue PhD?
Yeah,
Okay,
well, you know, it varies, right? Of course it varies. But, you know, one reality is that you're older and you might be much more in debt, and you may have kids and a partner and, you know, a life in a city, and the academic world in science, but also in all the other fields, is probably going to require you to move geographically. And in some fields, you might have to move multiple times. You might have to move to a different country to continue on the academic path. And, you know, this is a problem when you're in your 30s and you have kids and all of that. Not for everyone, but, you know, that's a consequence. There are psychological, sort of emotional consequences to doing this. I think a lot of people come out of their degrees feeling shitty about themselves. That sucks. You don't want to be 30 and feeling shitty about yourself. And there are practical consequences. Like, not all employers are really keen on hiring someone who has a PhD. And you know, on the one hand, that's kind of bullshit. On the other hand, I totally hear them on that, because there are a lot of skills that we don't develop when we do our PhDs. There are a million skills. And of course, skills you end up use will depend on you and what jobs you want to get and all of that. But there are a ton of really basic business world, like career skills that PhDs just don't learn. Just because it's, you know, it's not part of the job of being a graduate student. And so it can become quite difficult to transition into the working world, because you've never led a meeting in a business context. You don't know how to use email software. I mean, you just don't, right? Like, you may have your own Twitter account, but you've never worked professionally in social media.
Right.
And so you're up against candidates who may, you know, they may have master's degrees or just regular bachelor's degrees and are smart, but also 5 or 10 years of business experience. And yeah, I sound very depressed. I don't mean to sound depressing about this, but like real talk, you know, it's not necessarily the right thing.
Definitely. Okay. So now you said that, especially we all, I guess we all have our Facebook accounts and then Twitter accounts, but then using them for the business purpose is something that still, I think, a lot of people have not gotten used to.
Sure.
Right. So can you give like some insights onto how you transition from just saying your heart, what was on your heart on a Twitter or a Facebook post, to kind of being strategic in building a community, or
so lots of trial and error. Lots of trial and error. You know, I think there's a benefit to not knowing what you're doing, is because you just do it anyways, and then you realize later, oh shit, I really didn't know what I was doing. Oh well. Right. Okay, so let me get specific. So I now use, this is getting more common, but it's still not something that the average person does on social media, but I use a social scheduler, automator, I don't even know what to call these things, where the one I use is called Edgar, meetedgar.com, like meet Edgar. Yeah. And it allows you to add content. So in my case, tweets, but you can also hook up, you know, LinkedIn and Facebook. And so you add content, you can schedule it out. So as you've been, like, I've had 3 meetings this morning, and now I'm talking to you, and I haven't been on Twitter like live, but I've been tweeting. I mean, unless something went wrong, I've been tweeting. And I also have a assistant, I have a social media manager now, someone who works for me very part-time, who spends time in Edgar. And so I put time and money into finding content. So finding articles. When I say content, I mostly mean internet, like blog posts and articles. Finding that and then tweeting them out, or having, you know, my social media manager add that content to social media. So that's something that I spend money doing, right? I spend money on the program, and I spend money on the time that he spends doing that stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's the strategy for social media for me, is basically I roll my eyes at myself, but it's like, be the thought leader in this world, right? Be a hub for information, be a resource for people. You know, you can use different words for that. You know, be the go-to account, the go-to account for these issues. And I know that it pays off. I don't do the analytics on this stuff, so I don't know if it was really smart to spend all this time and money on this, but most of the clients that work with me now are folks that follow me on Twitter. They don't follow me and then hire me, but they follow me. I build a relationship with them over time, often without even realizing it. Because, and sometimes they interact with me on Twitter, and sometimes they're just reading my stuff and retweeting me. And then, years later, months later, when they're ready to talk to me, if it's right for them, then they'll reach out and hire me. So there is a strategy for that. Yeah, most of the people that hire me are people that already follow me on Twitter. And that's, again, there may be better, swifter, cheaper strategies to that, but that's where I'm at based on the stuff I've done in the past.
Yeah, that's great. I can definitely attest to that you put out great content, and that helps, and it shifts the conversation from being, okay, why aren't there, why am I the only one who's not getting a job or a tenure track position, to, okay, so this is normal.
It's normal. And in most fields, the vast majority of PhDs are not going to be in tenure track jobs. It's only really in humanities disciplines and maybe economics. In humanities disciplines, if you come from like a top program, you're probably going to be a tenure track prof. Maybe. But everyone else, you're not. And it's not because you suck. It's just there's not so many jobs.
So I guess I think we should spend a few more minutes here, because we kind of come from this. Even though things have changed so much around us, we kind of tend to have this baggage about what our own professors did, that they did a PhD, and then boom, you're going to have a fact-tech tenure track job, you're going to get this great recommendation. And then that was going to be a clear course that our parents, like if they had a graduate degree, they would get a good job, right? So, but that doesn't quite exist anymore. So, so when you go to universities and talk about it, and even on Twitter, do you kind of are trying to burst that bubble?
Right. Yeah. It's a totally different world, man. And, even younger professors or newer professors, I shouldn't assume they're younger, but the newer profs, for the most part, they're people that went from a PhD, maybe a postdoc, and then straight into a professor job. So they were the ones that were successful. And so they may not really get how shitty the academic job market is. And like my parents, I'm 37, so my parents are I'm a little bit older than a lot of new PhDs now, but not that much older. But my parents had the same. My mom worked for a government department, so she had a few different jobs, but within that same department for like 40 years, she worked in that one department, that one agency. My dad taught grade 7 for like 25, 30 years in the same, it's probably the same classroom. Right. And so that they had steady jobs with pensions and benefits and union jobs. Maybe not you, Wells. sometimes union, sometimes not, but like steady benefits, security, you know, we never talked about careers growing up because like they didn't necessarily have to manage their careers. It's just not like that. It's a different world. It's a totally different world now. It's a totally different world. And so I think, you know, the millennials, right?
Right.
I'm not necessarily, I bump up against the millennials, but we get it. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because a lot of professors, they don't get it because they haven't lived it. And even if they get it, it's difficult for them to know how to help.
Right.
And it's just, I mean, and I think it's an open question how much we can expect our professors to be able to help us.
Definitely.
You know, they have a lot of demands on their time and they aren't experts in this.
Definitely.
And but they can be open and supportive. Yeah.
I'm going to go back. So I love this quote by Steve Jobs that I want to kind of get into. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards.
Yeah.
And I want to say that, so can you reflect back on your life and think of some of the turning points in your life that you think led to this point here?
Oh, interesting. I'm laughing because the first thing that comes to mind is when I was doing my undergraduate degree. I guess you Americans would say your college. When I was in college, there's a different meaning here. So I was doing my undergrad. I worked part-time at a bookstore, and the section that I worked out of was called the lifestyle section. It was a lifestyle section, and it was most of the nonfiction was not the dictionaries and the business books, but the, you know, how to build a deck and the cookbooks and the self-help. So all that stuff was in the lifestyle section. And why am I telling you this? I remember it was so funny to like me and my family and my friends that I was working like in the self-help section. I was like Ms. Anti-self-help. But the joke is on me because guess who works at the life coach now? Like, I mean, hello, hi, I'm Jen. Yes, I work as a life coach. I mean, it sounds so stupid. Anyway, so I think sometimes you surprise yourself over the years and you realize, yeah, your younger self did not know. So let me answer this question this way. I have always been someone that, you know, given the right environment, I am a kind of like a cheerleader. I'm a supporter. I'm a booster. That's one aspect of my personality. So in high school, I worked on the yearbook. So I was the one that put together the yearbook, among other, you know, in a group of us. I would cheer on the sports teams. I was never into sports. Oh my God. But after school, I would be in the gym, like cheering on the sports teams. And that sounds so bizarre because I'm not a cheerleader type, whatever that means. But yeah, like, you know, I was there showing support. When I think I mentioned this, maybe I didn't, but during my PhD, I had a blog and a podcast for the indie music scene here in Toronto. And I'm not a musician, but I was a fan, right? I was a fan, and I would go to shows and I would talk to musicians, and I, you know, had a Facebook group and, you know, the blog and all of that. So I'm a community builder. And that was true then in grad school. I was involved in student government. I'm a keener, right? I think I'm a keener. I'm a keener. I'm a keener, and I like communities. So that's a thread, right? That's a thread that continues. I've always been someone who's super curious, and I love asking questions. And this never really occurred to me as like a thing until my last roommate. I live by myself now, but a few years ago, my roommate was like, "You ask questions. You're always asking questions." And it was slightly accusatory, but it really struck me as like, yeah, but no. Not everyone asks questions, right? Not everyone is curious in that way and a listener in that way. So that's been a thread, I think. that it's not shocking, the fact that I work as a coach. I mean, I'm talking at you constantly, Sudiksha, in this interview, but I like asking questions. I like listening. I think.
Me too.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. And then I like people, and I think people are really interesting. So the fact that I did a history PhD and now work as a coach, one of the things that draws those together is that I'm fascinated by what makes people do stuff. What motivates them? What gets people up in the morning? What the heck are they up to? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, my dissertation was, what the heck, guys? So, now I don't go to the archives and read like letters and diaries from people that are long dead, but I get to talk to real people about what the heck they're up to and help them make decisions in real time, which I find really fascinating and cool. So I think, being a community builder and a booster, and being a keener, right? Sort of being obsessive.
Yeah.
That's a British Canadian word, keener. And then liking bringing people together and having discussions and listening and being curious. That's all, I don't know, that's a big mess, but that's all part of looking back.
Yeah, and I think you bring all of those together in this work that you're doing. You already knew how to write blogs,
right?
Podcasts. So This has been this actually has been one of the biggest revelation for me after PhD is that people say, okay, you had this major, you had this degree, so you should do such and such and such. But then we forget about all the other experiences that we had and the person that we are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This idea that you take your CV and you turn it into your resume, that's terrible, because if you look at my CV, I have no personality.
Yeah.
And I only have academic skills. But actually the skills that I most value, the skills that most energize me, the skill areas are stuff that doesn't necessarily show up in the CV. Maybe like at the end in the service section, right? Yeah. But like the really fun stuff and the stuff that like gets other people like excited about what I do and gets other people like into my world, that's not on the CV. So why should I prioritize publications and conference presentations and degrees? Why should I prioritize that stuff? There's no value, unless there's value for me. But there wasn't a lot of value in that for me. Yeah, I'm rambling. I think part of the work that we all have to do is really identifying what is the stuff that energizes us and thinking specifically about what that stuff is, but then broadening out.
Right.
Broadening out. So here's a specific example, and that's another specific example. Oh, and hey, there's a theme here, community building. Oh, interesting. How can I harness that? And that doesn't mean you have a job that says you're a community builder, right? But it means that maybe part of your marketing, like me, is being on Twitter and, sharing resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. That's great. And it's so amazing now that once we open up and kind of find the people that we kind of gel with, there's a pattern here that's kind of that was hidden, but we see this coming up again and again, right?
Yeah. And way to go, critical thinking, man.
Okay, so you have I think coached over 100 students and also some faculty. Have you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of my clients are, I don't know, I haven't done the math on this, but I suspect that most of my clients have their PhDs, and some of them are faculty members.
Oh, okay. So why do faculty members come to you?
Yes. Why did faculty members come to us? Being a graduate student or postdoc is pretty different from being a professor. We don't necessarily know exactly what we're signing up for. So that's part of it. There's a lot of parts of it. I'm going to miss some. Another part of it is you get this job that's, it's this great job, quote unquote, but maybe it's in a place where you don't like to live. Maybe the job itself doesn't really suit you anymore. People's lives change, their priorities change. Working as a professor can be a really tough gig. It demands a lot of energy of people. And if you're not really into it, that's challenging. one of my clients now is a tenure track prof, doing well, right? Supported, awesome, well done. But she's not the only one I'm talking about this stuff. She wants to make a bigger impact on the world, and she doesn't think that her place really is in the classroom or doing academic papers. For her, I mean, for other people, that could totally be it, and I 100% back that. But for her personally, her strengths lie elsewhere, and she feels that she could make a bigger impact somewhere else. So we're talking about, when she's going to quit her tenure track job, which is scary.
Yeah.
But it's not the only client I've had. I mean, it's not the only story I've heard about that. I think, and she was talking about this, we're close to being millennials. And so often, this is a stereotype, but millennials have this sense of there are lots of things to do. Yeah. And changing jobs is normal, and it's creative and fun and exciting. And yes, it's a risk, but also this is the world we live in. So the idea of having a job for the next 40 years, that can not be so attractive sounding, right? Especially in the academic world, you might be saddled with colleagues who aren't the awesomest, and then in politics, and I think there's lots of reasons. It's a job, right? There's plenty of reasons why anyone in any job may not wish to stay in that job.
Mm. Very interesting. Actually, I've watched some of the TED Talks with the PhDs and tenure tracks, and how they are trying to mold things their way.
Yeah. It's not as flexible, I think, as we can imagine it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not as flexible. Yeah.
It's probably because when we think of professors, we want to be the already tenured and professors.
Yeah.
Not the starting up professors.
Yeah, a lot of demands on the time, and a lot of demands on the kinds of intellectual scholarly work that you can do. Not for everyone, but yeah. And it's I think there's other places to have a good life and a good career. It depends on the individual.
Right, definitely. So for students who or recent graduates, when do you think is a right time to hire a coach for themselves?
Right now. No. It comes, so the way that I work, for me, the right time is whenever someone's feeling stuck. Or a different metaphor to use is if you're sort of floating or you're waiting, or you're kind of, mired. I mean, just slightly different metaphors to use with this. But anytime you're feeling stuck, it's like, okay, let's get you unstuck. The right action that makes sense for you is always better than being passive, right? And waiting and letting life sort of inertia. That's no good. That's no good. So if you're feeling stuck and if it bothers you, I mean, sometimes you want to be stuck, but anytime where you're feeling like existential angst, that's when you come talk to me. And the benefit of working with individuals one at a time, one-on-one, is we can figure out exactly what the right path is for you. And we can figure out exactly what the right action is for you to take. So coaching, the way I do it, is all about taking action. The right action. And that action can mean thinking about stuff, having a conversation with your partner, applying for jobs, doing information interviews, whatever, starting your own business, whatever the action is.
So one of the, when you're talking to your clients, is one of the most important aspect that you deal with them is their mindset. Would that be right saying? I don't say, okay, today we're gonna have a session on mindset. It's not like that, but certainly part of the process, that's a outcome of the process, is shifting how you think about stuff. So let me give you an example. I talk a lot with clients about inner critics, or gremlins, I usually call these things, negative self-talk, stuff like imposter syndrome. Right.
So I think that can be a really powerful conversation to have with people around, what is your gremlin saying, right? What is the inner critic saying? And acknowledging that, expressing that out loud, listening to yourself say it, right? And then coming back saying, well, what's your response to the gremlin? What's your response to that? And that's an exercise that can shift your mindset, right? It's, well, I'm a loser with a PhD and I'm a failed academic. And well, what do you want to say back to that? Well, no, I mean, actually, this is not the right fit for me. Why should I try? Why, triangle, square box, like there's no value in making that, why, that's bullshit, right? So you could talk yourself out of that. And then part of the process over time is embracing what's important to you and, writing that stuff down, talking out loud about that stuff, talking out loud with me. I'm on your team, man. Like, I want what's right for you. So that shifts the mindset. That's a very long answer to a short question.
No, yeah. I think I used to say that to junior students myself. Like in academia, there's this famous quote, publish or perish. And we think that if you don't do this, the other alternative is perish.
Oh my God, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm still alive. My colleague Marin, she says, people don't get tenure track jobs. They don't die.
Right.
I'm not dead.
And if you hear, like, in the self-help world, it's when you fall down is the right time to kind of rise. But then here you say, so this, I feel like there are times when PhDs or recently graduate, whenever they fall down, it feels like their whole world kind of comes crumbling down. And because they have not looked at alternatives for themselves.
Yeah. And that's really heavy.
Yeah.
That's really heavy. Yeah. Because when you have this self-conception of the thing that you're good at, or maybe you're not so good at, in my case, the thing that you're supposed to be good at, the thing that you're good for, the only thing that you're good for is like not happening. Yikes. That's terrible. Yeah. So as part of the process is looking around, learning about new stuff, talking to people, realizing, oh, actually there's other possibilities. Huh. Okay. And that's not a 3-minute conversation. I mean, this happens over time. But there's ways to do that. There's ways to do that. And a lot of the time people are reluctant to do those things. But they're good. It's good. Take risks, right? Small risks, one at a time.
Right. I guess one of the two last questions for you would be, one, what would you advise current PhD students or recent graduates who are kind of thinking, now what? What would be your advice to them?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is, this is not going to be the right next step for everyone, but I think a lot of people are reluctant to take this step, and it's an excellent step, is do some informational interviews. And that can be talk to a person that you already know, that you feel comfortable with. It can also be a stranger, right? If you prefer to talk with a stranger. But do an informational interview. And don't reach out to the CEO of some fancy company, but keep it somewhere probably, within your network that you feel safe with. I think when people do information interviews, in my experience and experience, from other people that are, my clients and other people I've interacted with, those are really positive experiences. Almost everyone out there has gone through a career transition or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, right? So they get it. And if you talk to other PhDs who aren't working as professors, who aren't working as postdocs, who moved on to other things, they get it too, most of them, right? Most of them, they get it. So I guess it's about get out of your bubble. The caution there is there may be work that you want to do for yourself first. So maybe you want to deal with your gremlins first, right? Maybe you want to do a skills inventory, right? Maybe you want to sit down and really think, okay, so what is all the stuff that I actually know how to do to build your confidence, right? I mean, but certainly informational interviews can also be a way to build confidence, as well as helping you expand your network. So 2 birds, 1 stone. What do you think, Sudiksha? Is that making sense to you?
Yeah, actually, I hadn't thought about I hadn't heard about or thought about doing informational interviews even last year. And it came to mind, okay, how did I not know that? And usually when in universities, I've kind of taken all the courses or graduate development courses that was out there. But then you don't necessarily get the outside perspective from the faculty. There's the faculty panel and the graduate student panel.
Yeah.
And so, but it's kind of very intimidating for us to think that you're going to go out there and do informational interviews with somebody you don't know.
So you can do someone you do know. Yeah.
And what you ask.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask all kinds of things, right? But even simple stuff like, what do you do every day? How did you get into this? What's fun about it for you? What's less fun? What's a career path in this industry look like? Etc. What skills do you use most?
Yeah.
What recommendations do you have for somebody who might be interested in having the job that you have one day?
And that's a very very good point that you raise. As I get, even going to the one before, was you have to kind of accept that you don't know everything that's out there. I think that's been the hugest thing, because you're still living in that bubble thinking that that's the whole world.
Yeah.
And keeping in order to be able to take others' advice from outside the faculty, is to know that there may be something out there that you don't know.
Yeah. And advice is good, but also trust yourself. There's tons of stuff that you don't know that I don't know. I mean, tons. I'm nothing. I mean, I know nothing, right? Compared to the stuff I know, but the stuff I don't know. Yeah. But I think what sometimes people forget is you can trust yourself, is that actually you do know yourself, your intuition. If your intuition is screaming, do not take this job. You want to do, trust your gut, not your gremlins, right? If your gremlins are saying, you're not good enough, you're an imposter, you can't do this. Okay, maybe don't listen to that voice. But, if your gut is screaming, this sounds like a terrible job in a terrible city with a terrible supervisor, don't do it, right? Because you know yourself. So learn, but trust yourself. Am I making sense?
Yes. Yeah. Making sure, well, I'm very intuitive. So, and right now it's so awesome that people are, the neuroscience and everything, the leap in with the technology and the advances, people are really saying intuition is something that kind of should lead the next steps. Yeah.
It's an intuitive shortcut.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It allows you, when you can just trust your intuition, because you don't have to go through all of those cognitive steps.
Yeah.
And then you end up in the same decision.
Right.
You just know. Not always true, but yeah. Trust.
Okay, so my last question would be, you have such a huge, you have a big network of people. How can students kind of work with you or get in touch with you and learn from you?
Yep. So if anyone is interested in working with me one-on-one as in coaching, that context, they can go to my website, from PhD to life.com. TO2 life, and then on a bunch of different pages I've got to fill out this form to get on my waiting list. I have a small waiting list to do an initial consultation, so that's the next step. So that's easy. If anyone is interested in professional development resources, they can check out Beyond Prof, P-R-O-F, beyondprof.com. And we've got a conference coming up in May. I say conference because that's the academic word, but what it means is it's a series of webinars. So it's all online. The first 2 days, the first day is panel discussions with PhDs, different PhDs working in different jobs. It's like a crash course. It's like informational interviews, right? It's like you get to meet a whole bunch of people, hear about what they do. And then the second day is professional development seminars, webinars. So how to write a resume, how to network, specific stuff. So crash course, right? Marin would say it's crisis intervention. Like,
right.
Oh shit, how do I do this? And there'll be more stuff coming from Beyond Prof in future, beyond the professoriate. That's that business. And then if anyone is self-employed or freelancing, consulting, or getting into that world, I've got that new community, Sudiksha, you are in it, as you know. That's selfemployedphd.com. You can sign up for that mailing list, and I will let you know when I know what I need to know. But the bottom line is I'm on Twitter at From PhD to Life, and that's also a great way, if you don't want to work with me, but if anyone has any comments or questions or wants to share stuff with me, I'm always happy, and I will respond.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to add in there that as graduate students, we do have a lot of graduate students have the luxury of funds from their programs, and this will be my last question, is to have students kind of gone back to their programs or departments and had their fees paid to be on the Beyond Professoriate conference.
So for the conference, we have half of our tickets usually are sold to institutions in bulk.
Oh, okay.
So if anyone listening, if you think there's a possibility for an institution to cover your ticket, absolutely. Your faculty of graduate student, your department, career services, maybe, but probably faculty of graduate studies, school of graduate studies would be the ones to approach about that. We're happy to sell tickets in bulk to those guys.
Okay, it was such an informative interview. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, you're welcome, Sudiksha. My pleasure. It's great to chat with you. Good luck, everyone out there.
Today I'm excited to have Jennifer Polk here with us, and I'm going to read a short bio from her press kit on from PhD to life.com. Jennifer Polk works as an academic, career, and life coach. Her clients, graduate students, and PhDs are a diverse group of individuals based all around the world, from Canada, the US, the UK, Europe, Australia, and elsewhere. Jen speaks on campuses and at conferences throughout North America on issues related to graduate education and career outcomes for PhD. And her writing has appeared in the Globe and Mail, University Affairs, Vitae, and Academic Matters. You can find Jen online at fromphd2life.com, which features resources for PhD changers, PhD career changers, and at her award-winning University Affairs blog. Jen earned her PhD in history from the University of Toronto in 2012. Again, we're so glad to have you. Thank you for being here. Welcome, Jen.